Welcome to your third sample question regarding dependent children, as the topic relates to your ICCRC Full Skills Exam. So this question here is going to be a little bit more difficult than the previous two that we saw. And this one here is going to really test your knowledge on three main areas as it relates to dependent children sponsorship, and of course as the entire topic relates to your ICCRC Full Skills Exam. So those three topics that we're going to test you on here are, well, the first one's the definition of a dependent child. So we saw this through a few examples in the lesson, and we took a look at 10 examples really with Tony, and then we took a look at a couple others as well. So this one's going to touch upon the same logic and same theme just a little bit with regard to your understanding of the definition of a dependent child. The second area we're going to look at through the context of this question has to do with the lock-in age and how that relates to immigration in general, and of course how it relates to your exam. Okay, finally we'll take a look at divorce and how divorce can play a role in sponsorship of a child. Alright, so get ready. This is a pretty tough question, and I hope you do well. And if you don't do well in answering the question, it's perfectly fine. This is a learning experience. Alright, so this one is a tricky question. It's pretty difficult, but let's see if we can work through it. So you see the countdown timer counting down. If you want to pause the video or you want to put it on mute and try to answer it in the minute 43 remaining, well, that's a good idea. If you want to listen to me, I'll read the question to you. Priscilla is a permanent resident who has been living in Dubai for the last 12 months. She originally came to Canada on a one-year work contract and obtained her permanent resident status 2 years ago while living in Winnipeg. While in Dubai, she met a man named Ahmed at work. The couple began dating and moved in together 6 months ago. Unfortunately, Priscilla's work contract is finishing in 6 months and she must return to Canada. However, she would like to sponsor Ahmed for permanent residency at that point. She explains that Ahmed has 3 children from his previous marriage. His oldest child, Mahmoud, is 22 years old and single. He studies engineering at the University of Dubai and will graduate in 2 years. His second oldest son, Ramses, is 18 and he will graduate from university in a year, after which he would like to move to Canada to live with his parents. Ahmed's third child, Lana, is 7 years old and is in the sole custody of Ahmed's ex-wife, and he has not been in contact with her in any way since she was born, since Ahmed's ex-wife does not want Ahmed to be in Lana's life at all. Assuming Ahmed qualifies as a common law partner, which of his children will be eligible to immigrate as dependent children? So you can see that already we have a lot of names, a lot of family relationships and things like that we're going to have to decipher. Well, that's going to be the fun part of this question. So the answers deal with really answering the question of which of his children would qualify to immigrate. So we have Mahmoud, Ramses, and Lana all qualify. Mahmoud, Ramses, and Lana all do not qualify. Only Lana qualifies, and only Ramses qualifies. So let's see how we do in this question. This is a pretty tricky one. It's a bit long. It's a bit complex, but you can do it. All right, so let's move on. If you want to press pause now and try to figure out the answer on your own, that's a good idea. If you want to compare your answer and the procedure, really, of finding the answer with what we're going to do in the rest of the video, that is also a really good idea. Okay, so let's take a look at C to begin with. All right, so C says that only Lana will meet the definition of dependent child for immigration purposes. Now, when we refer back to the story and we look at the section dealing with Lana, we could see that Lana is 7 years old. So that might be a good sign for you because she would meet the age requirement. But remember, the age requirement isn't the only requirement, right? All right, so when we look at the relationship as well between Ahmed and Lana, we can see that there hasn't been a relationship at all. And the important one here is the last little part of that sentence, which says that Ahmed's ex-wife does not want Ahmed to be in Lana's life at all. So this one tests your knowledge of divorces and how divorces affect dependent child sponsorship. All right, so let's take a look and review what we talked about with regard to divorces, unmarried parents, and dependent children. So the key to this whole answer, for you to know that this is incorrect, is that, remember, if somebody has sole custody of a child, or even joint custody of a child, the other partner has to obtain permission for immigration. Now, when they say there's a possible Article 36 inadmissibility, that would be kidnapping, of course. You can't take someone's child who you're not in custody of and bring them to another country without permission. All right, so with this one, we could see that C is definitely incorrect because Ahmed's ex-wife doesn't want Ahmed in Lana's life at all, and she has custody. Okay, so we saw in C that Ahmed's ex-wife has sole custody of Lana, and she doesn't want Ahmed in Lana's life at all, so Ahmed would definitely not be able to get permission to sponsor her for immigration. Now, in the context of your exam, don't start thinking of other solutions and things like that are outside of the story. So a lot of people seem to get, in the seminars, a lot of people seem to get a little bit confused with scenarios like this, and they add different things to the story that aren't actually in it. So a lot of people, they might look at this question and say, no, but maybe Ahmed and his ex-wife will get together and they'll be friends, and that she'll allow Ahmed to sponsor Lana. That's outside of the scenario here, so don't really try to confuse yourself with putting information that's not in the scenario into the question, because in terms of your exam, you don't really have that much time to answer questions like this, and you want to be as concise as possible. All right, so, and by understanding that Lana will not meet the definition of dependent child, we know that A is also incorrect, because Lana doesn't meet the definition, even though maybe Mahmoud and maybe Ramses do. All right, so now we're left with two potential answers, and let's explore the difference between B and D. So when we're taking a look at B, B essentially says that everybody doesn't meet the requirements, the definition of a dependent child to immigrate. And D says that only Ramses meets the definition. So let's take a look at Mahmoud next to help us solidify whether or not B is incorrect or correct. All right, so let's see, do they all not meet the definition of dependent child? So by understanding if they all meet or they all do not meet, I mean, it's going to really help us in deciphering what the correct answer is. So Mahmoud really holds the key to this. Now Mahmoud is 22 and single, so he's a student, and he's going to graduate in a couple years. Well, this one's pretty straightforward because he is 22, and regardless of him being single, it doesn't really make a difference because he simply doesn't qualify. So even though he's a student, even though he's single, he doesn't qualify simply because he's over the age of 22. So with that one, we can see that Mahmoud and Lana definitely don't qualify. But we're not too sure yet about Ramses. So we're going to have to dig into Ramses. And of course, see if he meets the definition of a dependent child. If he does, then we're going to see D as the correct answer. If he doesn't, then we are going to, of course, look at B as the correct answer. So for B, we've deciphered a little bit of it, but we need to confirm that last little bit. All right, so let's see. So Ramses is 18. And, well, just as we saw with Mahmoud, it's a similar situation. The only difference really is the age. Okay, so he's going to graduate from university in a year. That's okay. So he's under the age of 22, of course, which definitely puts him on the right track. And as long as he remains under 22 when he comes to Canada to activate his permanent residency, well, then he, of course, meets the definition of a dependent child. So in the end, we have D as the correct answer. This is a great question because it shows you kind of a process of elimination. So we've eliminated the other answers, and that leads us, of course, towards being even more certain that D is the correct answer. All right, so I hope this was a good question for you. It could be a little bit tricky, but in the end, when we take a look at Ramses, well, we can see that he certainly meets the qualifications of a dependent child. And essentially looking at the other two, at Mahmoud and Lana, well, we can see that they don't. So that, of course, leads us towards D as being the correct answer. All right, a big thank you for tuning in. It's always such a pleasure chatting with everyone. If you didn't get this question correct, that's fine. Just review the lesson. Make sure it sinks in. A big part of this, of course, is incorporating your immigration knowledge into an exam setting. So that'll come with time, but keep working and you'll do fine. All right, thanks again. Have a really great afternoon.